Hey guys, what's up? I've been getting a lot of questions recently again about Aphelios builds in general right now. And it's been a minute since I've done one of these build guides. I think it's been like half a year at this point. I don't really remember. So I thought I'd just make a quick video about it again. I'm gonna talk about like 3-ish builds that are currently viable, but you really only need one of those. So let's just get into it. So the first of the 3 builds is gonna look something like Untal first item, percent pen item second, and then you go for Infinity Edge third, ideally. I've basically been building it ever since the season started, and you really just cannot go wrong with it. The idea behind that is that Untal is just Evolve's best first item option right now, by far. Mainly because Riot has either decided to gut or remove any other good first item option that we've ever had completely for Aphelios. So this is where we're at. Untal has received quite a lot of buffs. It's been good for a while, but it's just by far the best first item option right now. It's a little bit weaker once you actually complete it, of course, because you need to actually stack up the crit chance, but honestly, it doesn't take that long for that to happen. And once you have it stacked up, it's just miles better than any other first item option. After that, instead of what people would usually expect to be like Infinity Edge second item, you want to build either Lord Doms or Mortal Reminder for 2 reasons really. One, a lot of tanks are very, very oppressive right now. They're about to get nerfed a little bit, yes, but they're still going to be played in a lot of games. And you really, really, really need just that early 40% or 35% armor penetration, because even into full squishy team comps, that is still a really high number. If you complete this item at like level 11, level 12, where most even 80 carries have like 70 to 75 base armor, you still get rid of roughly over 35 armor. It's basically a lethality item with 35 AD, less than all the other options, but you have like 35 lethality instead of like the 10 to 18 that most other lethality options have. So in that regard, it's just absolutely insane, even into the most squishy of champions. That doesn't even count for playing against tanks yet. And into tanks, obviously, it's just way better. It feels so good to have that second item, Lord Doms or Mortal Reminder, compared to an Infinity Edge, which takes longer to complete and just doesn't provide that same kind of DPS. Obviously, if you really are into like a full squishy team comp where most enemy champions only have like 80 base armor, and you're winning like super hard, like you go in 10 and 0 with 10 CS per minute, then yes, you can obviously still build Infinity Edge second and you can swap that around. In most cases, in most games, I really would not recommend it. And that's basically it. As a 4th item option, I've kind of been reverting to picking a Zeal item in 4th slot a lot lately. It's just really, really good. It provides a little bit less than like 80 crit options as a 4th item, maybe, but the movement speed and the mobility and the overall just freedom you get from getting this item in 4th slot feels really, really good. And then obviously as a 5th item, I've really only been resorting to Bloodthirster as a 5th item. If you really, really need it into some heavy CC comps, you can go Mercurials, but that's really just been the only options I've been buying. I will say real quick, if you don't want to buy a 4th item Zeal into like swishier team comps, what you can also do is you just buy the Noon Quiver and then you don't complete Shield Bow actually and just build straight into BT right after with a BF sword into BT on your next base, and it feels sometimes even better. The second build I wanted to talk about is not going to be that much different, but I feel like it is worth talking about. It's mainly just about the first item rush. In this case, it's Infinity Edge, which it's not really a thing right now anymore because it's just, man. It is so goddamn expensive. They are about to make it cheaper though. They are gonna make it cheaper. They're gonna reduce the AD by 5, so it has 65 AD by then. I'm still recording this on like the day before the patch, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway. It's gonna have 65 AD and it's gonna go down by 150 gold, so it's gonna cost 3,450 gold. I don't think it really warrants it to be a first item purchase in a lot of games still, even with that price reduction. But I will say, if you are going 5-0 in lane, and you're hitting 10 CS per minute and you're just smashing lane, there isn't much of a point in going Untal or Collector first when you could just build Infinity Edge and then second item Armor Pen right after, because that is just one of the best 2 item spikes you could even possibly get. And if you are smashing lane, it is gonna feel wonderful. But in most games where you are not snowballing this insanely hard, I wouldn't say it's worth it because it's really expensive. And if you're just forcing yourself into building IE first, it can actually set you back a lot because other champions are going to get a first item spike way faster. And then you're just going to be in a really awkward spot, even upon completion, because it's so expensive. So the third build I wanted to talk about, which is a little bit more interesting, is Ghostblade, which I have been doing a lot lately. But I will say right away, I do not recommend it. It's a really, really good build, but I don't recommend it. Let me try to explain. Ghostblade is insanely good because it's really, really cheap. It has a lot of lethality. It gives you mobility and playmaking potential, which is just insane. It is definitely one of his best first item spikes by far. But the thing is, with Ghostblade in general, without even talking about what we're going to build after, Ghostblade build in general, no matter what you build after, is a build that just, it needs you to stay ahead and keep snowballing and snowballing, or you're gonna be in a really, really awkward spot. Once you start losing, it's gonna feel really, really, really bad compared to if you were just building standard crits like Utah into percent pen into Infinity Edge. Usually once you have Ghostblade, I recommend, you can sometimes buy a Dirk, but I would never complete it to buy collector. It's just really, really bad. I still, even with the Ghostblade build, I would recommend just sticking to LDR or Mortal Reminder as a second item. And then, because again, you are gonna get effectively so much lethality from those two items alone that you are gonna deal true damage to pretty much everything in mid-game anyway. If enemy champions were to suddenly build a lot of armor, where collector would be completely worthless, LDR is actually gonna help you scale in that regard. But after that, ideally you just wanna build into IE, and then shield bow third, or again build like the Noon Quiver into BT as another slot. So now the main reason why I don't recommend it is exactly because the build just needs you to stay ahead of the curve a lot more than if you were just building into standard crit, is basically what I'm trying to say. Because if you are going to start losing while you're sitting on Ghostblade and LDR and you're building into Infinity Edge or something, you're most of the time still just going to sit on 25% crit. A lot of lethality, sure, but if you start losing, people are going to get levels, they're going to get items, and that lethality is becoming a lot more worthless very, very quickly. And it just puts you in a really, really awkward spot where you don't have DPS. You're not scaling as well because you're so far behind on your crit items, and the enemy team is just starting to ramp up and ramp up and ramp up. So yes, it's a really, really good build if you're confident enough to not make any mistakes, or at least a lot less than the crit build, and you get to that Infinity Edge, and you get to that shield bow, and you get to that BT with a relatively good curve, then this build is absolutely insane, of course. But if you were to start dying while you're sitting on Ghostblade and LDR, and you sit on your BF sword, and suddenly you're throwing your lead, you're just not gonna be in a good spot, compared to if you were running Yuntal into LDR and you're sitting on that BF sword and you start slightly throwing, you're still thinking you're okay because you're gonna get that 75% crit spike soon, and you have Infinity Edge and it's a super big spike. With the Ghostblade build, that's not really the case. So that is basically why I don't really recommend it to people. It's a very high risk, little bit more reward kind of build, but if you do fuck up, you are fucked. In terms of skill maxing, which a lot of people are asking about as well, for this build in particular, if you run Ghostblade into LDR or whatever, you know, most of what I do is pretty standard. I just put 3 points into Q and then start putting my points into E right after. The thing is though, compared to what most people think, I don't actually ever really max out my lethality, even into the squishiest of team comps, because I feel like once you are winning really hard, which is what you're supposed to do with the Ghostblade build, you're gonna end up with 18 lethality from Ghostblade, roughly 22 from 4 points into E already at like level, what is it? I think like level 8 or something. And then on top of that, second item LDR or something, providing you 40% armor pen. It's already gonna add up to, at the very least, 70 armor reduction, 75 armor reduction, which at level 11 or 12, when you get that second item, is pretty much what any squishy team comp is gonna have at that point anyway. And any more points into E would at that point probably just be overkill and kind of a waste of points. I will say at this point, I just like putting my points into W earlier a lot more, because the build itself doesn't provide you with any sort of attack speed really at all. So in mid game, it can feel a little bit clunky, even though you're all about that burst. In like team fights and stuff for 25 minutes or something, if you're gonna end up having like almost no attack speed whatsoever, basically, it can feel very clunky very quickly, especially when you're gonna have to be the one to carry team fights yourself. I mostly end up putting like 3 to 4 points into Q early on, then putting most of my points into lethality, up to like 4-ish points, sometimes 5. And then just put the rest into W until that is maxed out. I feel like you really don't need to worry about maxing one thing or the other that much. In terms of runes real quick, I've basically just been running the same page in 90% of my games, regardless of which build I've actually been playing. I basically go PTA almost every game. Then the first row of positions, pretty much whatever, but I've been mostly going Absorb Life, into Bloodline, into Cut Down. And then secondary runes, which get a little bit interesting, I usually run Free Boots and Cosmic Insight, because I think Free Boots generally is just really, really OP. The only time I don't do it is when I'm like Engage Support into Engage Support, that kind of matchup, and I feel like I need that safety of like earlier tier 2 boots. That is when I run Sorcery second with Nimbus Cloak and Gathering Storm, or just Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm, whichever one you prefer. It's really... Nimbus can be good, it's kind of underrated, but it's... In some poke-heavy matchups, you can run Fleet instead of PTA, and then you run Biscuits instead of Cosmic Insight second, but that's kind of a minor thing. Or into really, really neutral matchups, Fleet can be fine too if trading with PTA is not that important, because the Fleet for movement speed in mid and late game can be kind of nice, actually, compared to PTA, but generally I just recommend people to just go PTA, because people have been asking about it too. Axiom Arcanist, or whatever it's called, the new rune that was added this season. I've tried it a little bit, not that much, I'm gonna be honest, but in the games I've tried it, it really hasn't felt like it's made any sort of impact at all. I feel like the rune it's a really cool concept, but I feel for FL it's just not worth it compared to all the other options. But yeah, I think that basically sums it up. One more thing real quick, because it's been kind of a trend lately, and because the item is really, really good right now overall, and I've been getting questions about it a lot. Swifties on Aphelios. Swifties are really, really broken overall right now on a lot of champions, and the win rate is really, really good and all that. Other people have been building it on Aphelios a lot, and they've been telling me to do it. I have to say, I've given it a try in some games. I'm still really just not the biggest fan of it. I get why people do it, and maybe that's a me thing. Maybe it's just personal preference or whatever. But every time I've built Swifties, I feel like the boots, or I feel like the movement speed you get from them compared to the attack speed you'd get from Berserkers always just feels not worth for me. I don't think Swifties is that bad. It's probably going to get nerfed in the future. Swifties overall are just really, really good right now. If you feel like it works for you, please build it. I personally can't really recommend it, but maybe that's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid. But I think that's it. If you think I missed anything or I didn't talk about anything you wanted me to talk about, just let me know in the comments. I will try to respond to any build questions you guys have. If there's anything I didn't like explain or missed or just forgot about. I'm pretty sure I thought about most of the things. If I didn't talk about it or something, it's probably because I think the build is not good or not viable or whatever. But, you know, if you have any questions about it, just let me know in the comments. I'll try to respond to as much as I can. And that's it. If you want to, you can follow my Twitch, subscribe to YouTube, come hang out. Anyway, good luck on your grind. Take care, you guys. See you around. Bye.